Akashvani.
Radioscope, the National Science Magazine program.
Hello there and welcome to this edition of Radioscope. On the occasion of United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021-2030, we bring you an interview with Professor Gururaja KV. Talking to him is Kshama V. Bhanuprakash, science writer and educator.
Hello dear listeners. We are privileged to host Dr. KV Gururaja, Professor and holder of Dr. TMA Pai Endowment Chair at the Endurance, Acoustics and Anthropogenic Climate Change Lab at Srishti Manipal Institute, Bengaluru. Dr. Gururaja's extensive research in amphibian ecology, behavior and landscape restoration in India's Western Ghats has led to the description of 23 new frog species, 3 new breeding behaviors and 2 new fish species. He also co-authored a recent Nature paper on global amphibian declines in the face of emerging threats. An advocate of citizen science, he leads programs like Mapping Malabar Tree Toad and Frog Watch India and champions habitat restoration through the Batracharium In Situ Conservation Initiative. His achievements include the State Biodiversity Award, the Geospatial Excellence Award for the Frog Find app, and the Prajavani Achievers Award 2022. Today's conversation ties Dr. Gururaja's work to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, a global movement to prevent, halt, and reverse ecosystem degradation across forests, wetlands, and human landscapes. Welcome, Dr. Gururaja.
Thank you, Kshama. Thank you, Akashvani, for the invite.
Under the UN Decade, restoration projects emphasize local engagement and biodiversity recovery. Dr. Gururaja, your Frog Watch and Mapping Malabar Tree Toad citizen science initiatives appear to align with the approach. How have these projects contributed to habitat restoration efforts in Western Ghats, and in what ways do they support UN goals for ecosystem restoration?
Thanks to last 20-25 years, we were able to discover more species. Like where we are standing today is about 465 species of amphibians in India. This is one of the key learning for me through years of experience working in the field. Instead of looking at a species, can we focus on landscape? But our entry point can be amphibians. And that's how we started with frogs. When people start looking at frogs in their backyard, there is a way they engage with. They perhaps take a picture and post it. That is a good way to say what you have. So once you know what you have, then if there are issues related with what you don't have or what you are going to lose, people themselves are champions. I need not have to be there. And scientists can't go everywhere.
The UN's vision highlights mosaic restoration, integrating ecological, social, and economic functions across landscapes. Could you explain how the Batracharium model functions as an in situ restoration tool and how it connects with larger scale mosaic restoration of amphibian habitats in Western Ghats?
Frogs are associated with rainfall. And there are cultural practices where they do frog marriages. It happened 3 years ago after the COVID. There was a proper marriage function that happened in, I think, Kalsanka near Udupi, and they elaborately did the marriage function of marrying of 2 bullfrogs, which is very common in India. When I showed that movie clip, people were telling me it is very cruel. So let us see it from the conservation perspective. If you can see what is they are trying to do, with which if there are conservation aspects, why can't we just appreciate that? What they have and what we have. Can we have a negotiating space where we can pitch and talk about what we need? Have something for people to watch, read, right? So we are translating that as a small booklet of an area, having the listed species over there, and we give it out to people saying that, okay, go around this place, you're going to see these species. So we started this in one of the leading hotel in Karnataka, in Coorg, and then we replicated that in a small homestay in Karkala. So these are the 2 places now which is practicing Batracharium. Again, why we selected those places instead of protected area is the protected area is already there, which is fortified.
amphibians are very sensitive to environmental degradation. Based on your findings in nature and wider field work, how can amphibian monitoring guide restoration priorities, especially regarding hydrology, forest connectivity, and climate resilience in degraded Western Ghats landscapes?
A discovery of the century is the Nasica batrachus species, or the pig-nosed frog from Kerala. The question is, this was known to people much earlier. Even 100 years ago, the tadpole of this species was described. People use the tadpole as a bushmeat. Now, how the scientific information gets into what people are practicing? As long as people practice for their own cultural practice, that should be allowed. But the moment it becomes a kind of thing where it is marketed or it is done in large scale, that is where we need to intervene and trying to say that this is going to degrade. Otherwise, some of these things I think we should just accept and move ahead. What I personally feel is that we have to engage with the people. We have to make them understand what kind of ecosystem function amphibians do, because they are the bioindicator as well as they feed on insects. At least 1/10 of the body size of a frog, any frog for that matter. Bullfrogs weigh around 400 grams. 1/10 is 40 grams. 40 grams of insects, you can imagine how many it would be. And how can they damage the crop? So if you can relate these kind of issues, because for somebody to conserve, it needs to connect to their daily life. I can't simply say that, oh, go and conserve frog. So the first question is why frog? What it does? So if you are able to connect these dots and their ecosystem function and how it is beneficial, even though benefit shouldn't be seen as something for which you have to conserve, but at the same time you need that connecting point. If you are able to do that, I can see a lot of scope from people who will say, okay, we know what species we have, we know how much we are spending on this, and how we can reduce the consumption of pesticides, and that's how our crops are growing.
You have worked extensively in India's Western Ghats and have been to Amazon forests too. Do you observe similar ecosystem degradation issues such as deforestation, fragmentation, biodiversity loss in both regions? And if restoration methods applied in the Amazon, such as reforestation corridors, agroforestry, hydrological restoration, do they prove effective? Could they be adapted here in Karnataka's Western Ghats too?
So Amazon is pretty large. Diversity is pretty huge. What you have in India perhaps is 465 species. What you have in Amazon is 900 species of amphibians. But the issues remain same. So all the issues are similar, but the extent or the scale is completely different. We also have population hugely remaining in these areas. And the resources over there is not restricted to them, but it goes to, let's say, Bangalore requires power supply. Where it comes from Sharavati, which is inside the Western Ghats. And people are seeing it as resource, so that's why they want to tap it also. There are many dams that is being constructed. Why? Again, there is a resource, there is some users. So if we can democratically see it again, I follow Madhav Gadgil's approach in saying that it is people who should know what is happening to them, rather than people sitting in Bangalore or scientists sitting here trying to tell them. One of the example is the fortified conservation, right? We have top-down approach kind of, we have a blanket fortified conservation of tigers. Nobody should be there, evict them from the tiger conservation zones. It may not work in Karnataka because people have lived with tigers for many, many years. The moment you do these kind of stuff, there's conflict. So how to reduce conflict, we should be looking at. So how to involve people, we should be looking at. So even if it is a developmental project, I am not against development, but development at what cost? Are we able to understand ecology as a primary thing than development? Right. One example I give before I conclude this, Malabar tree toad is considered as an endangered species in 2004. It was first described in 1875-76 by Gunther. For 100 years, it was not observed. So based on these few observations and talking to few scientists at that point in time, IUCN declared it as an endangered species. However, fast forward to 2020, when we had done this as a mapping Malabar tree toad project, there were 200 plus observations from Western Ghats, and IUCN declared it as least concern. So see from endangered how it has become least concern. Now, is that over? It is not over, because policy still has not accepted. And policy came in 2022 of Indian Wildlife Protection Act in revised, amended list of species. Now the Malabar tree toad is a Schedule 2 species. The challenge is not putting it in Schedule 2. The challenge is it's already declared as least concern. Why it still got the Schedule 2? Now in order to change Schedule 2, it has to be again tabled in Parliament. Now you see how much delay, the time get lost in this translation of scientific knowledge into a policy. In all these things, for me, where is that quick translation of knowledge into implementable thing on ground? I think this is where our conservation has to take a different route of appreciating complexity, understanding the ground realities, and coming back and working around these things. That's where I stop.
Dr. Gururaja, your leadership in scientific discovery, citizen engagement, and habitat protection illustrates how research can intersect with action in real landscapes. We appreciate your time and wish you continued success in restorative science and conservation efforts. Thank you for joining us at Akashvani Bengaluru.
Thank you, Kshama, and thank you, Akashvani.
Thank you, Shama, for that insightful interview. We addressed the issue of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021-2030. And dear listeners, that brings us to the end of this edition of Radioscope. We hope you enjoyed your evening with us. The program was presented and produced by Rosalind Matthew. This was a presentation of Akashvani Bengaluru, brought to you by Akashvani Delhi.
Radioscope, the National Science Magazine program.